Hello, everybody, and thank you for being here. My name is Alejandro Sánchez Cabrera, and the title of my presentation is Romantic Intertexts, Taylor Swift's Dialogue with Romantic Literature. First of all, I have to say that I have a sore throat, so my apologies. And also that since we don't have a lot of time, there are a couple of moments in this presentation that instead of reading some lyrics or poems, I will ask you to pause the video and read them so we save those minutes. Well, music, despite being assiduously consumed by all and treated as an instrument of normalization, accompaniment, or sometimes a source to build or find resilience, especially in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, is not considered as an object of study beyond the field of musicology or cultural studies, and it is therefore forgotten in philological and literary studies. In the academic realm, the literary side does not seem to have engaged with music. According to Michael Ingham, and I quote, "The intrinsically protean interactive quality of song has caused it to be rather neglected in this context." Indeed, although popular song has been the subject of various types of research, the dynamic intertextual and intermediate relationship between the literary arts and the art of the popular song has not been widely recognized. Moreover, as Ingham also points out, it has lacked visibility by comparison with more dominant adaptation practices, especially those for the screen or the stage. Moreover, there is a tendency to overlook the depth and complexity of popular music and to ignore the literary song interplay that takes place in it, particularly in pop music, due to the widespread perception that pop songs are merely a form of low-value entertainment. As Ingham notes, the preconception that literary texts align more closely with serious music has precluded more systematic scholarly investigation, or at least restricted it to the pockets of interest among song enthusiasts. Additionally, the almost non-existent recognition of pop as a serious field of study may be due to its identity association with the feminine and the queer. For those living on the margins of representation, pop music, as a representational space for the queer, as Spanish writer Juan P. Sánchez points out, se vuelve un espacio a rellenar con lo que uno desea, un horizonte de expectativas, un espacio de reafirmación de que existe lo que uno es o lo que uno quiere ser. Pop music does not conform to the hegemonically patriarchal and masculine order, and therefore it is excluded from sociocultural discourses that are considered serious and important under this order. However, although it is evident that this field has not been sufficiently explored and a greater academic commitment is needed, some studies, perhaps boosted by the Nobel Prize in Literature won by Bob Dylan in 2016 or the honorary doctorate awarded to Taylor Swift by the New York University in 2022, have begun to place a value on the great work of song lyric composition, sometimes comparing it to the writing of poetry, even going as far as to advocate, as it is the case of my own research project, that song lyrics hold the potential to codify the zeitgeist of our era, encapsulating the most remarkable capacity of emotional expression and a potential social mirror in which one can look into in order to understand both individual and collective emotions of our present, how they intertextually align with literary representations in the past, and even the way to face future anxieties through the finding of places of refuge in music. There are few but excellent contributions that allow us to firstly approach an intertextual and intermediate study considering music, and secondly outline a model of adaptation theory that considers the literature-song relationship. The contributions of Janet, Rawelski, Antonio Gil González, and Javier Pardo are already canonical, and they are essential for addressing the phenomenon of intermediality. They provide a solid foundation for developing a theoretical framework in the field and highlight the shift from the literary center to a bee-centered constellation integrated by literary, musical, audiovisual, graphic, or digital narratives. And well, although they observe the case of the song without delving into it, they provide the groundwork that shapes the theory presented by Rocío Badía Fumaz and Clara Marías in 2024 for the specific analysis of musical works that contain literary references, especially considering the genre of contemporary popular song. This paper focuses on the phenomena that Badia Fumat and Marias describe as intermedial presences and intermedial references within their model. As you can see here, intermedial presences are the effective presence of one or more literary works within a song, whether in their entirety or not, and at a linguistic level. And intermedial references are general references that are not recognizable as belonging to a specific work, but rather to literature in general, as well as explicit references to the literature realm. Um, the process of writing, the naming of elements that belong to the field of literature, and also at a linguistic level. I argue that Taylor Swift's music in general, and the albums Folklore and Evermore in particular, even though I will be focusing here briefly on Folklore, serve as an excellent example of pop mainstream music that not only honors a literary tradition by drawing inspiration from literary works and by intertextually referencing them, but also appeals to an emotional and affective perspective to create connections between female experiences in literature and those that are being lived and experienced today. Even though Taylor Swift is considered as one of the most important and relevant figures of today's popular culture, there exists little analysis of her musical works, particularly her lyrics, which remain the fulcrum of her art. The work that has been done is mostly about her image as a popular icon, um, yeah, and as a feminist icon, even though that is questionable from a post-feminist perspective. But not enough attention has been paid to her particular skills and techniques when writing. And well, I am referring not only to the work of poetically writing, something that we can see if we take a look at the lyrics and analyze them as poetry. They are filled with literary devices, well, like I'm thinking of alliteration, symbolism, antanaclasis, metaphors, and so on and so forth, but also to the incredibly skilled way of successfully narrating and telling stories in her music, something that in her pandemic sister albums Folklore and Evermore is particularly connected to existing literary works like Rebecca, Jane Eyre, or The Great Gatsby. Swift's change in style during her pandemic releases from a diaristic way to a less confessional narrative created an author-listener relationship established by the setting up of a detailed narrative achieved through world-building details. Some of these choices refer back to Taylor's previous songs, something we could consider, well, something we can consider intratextuality, while others refer to descriptions of existing fictional narratives, something we call intertextuality. Music critic Ann Powers wondered, and I quote, "What is folklore if not a body constructed of memory, a shared sense of the world, built of myths, heard stories, much repeated stories, and stories that change because people needed them to change?" By connecting the narratives created during and around the pandemic and the general need for escapism when the album Folklore was composed, with past narratives that also promoted this longing for escape, Taylor Swift is also presenting a contemporary romantic narrative, one that uses poetry from authors like Coleridge, Wordsworth, or Charlotte Smith to respond to contemporary anxieties. Perhaps most evidently, the references to the Romantic period flourish in the song The Lakes, which is the closing track on the album Folklore, and it is the catalyst to this romantic world reconstruction. As you can see here, she sings, and I quote, "Tell me what are my words worth, take me to the lakes where all the poets went to die." We can see here a clear reference to Wordsworth, and we can also see how she's merging historical reality with fantasy as the lakes become a perfect place for emotional expressions. In the opening lines of this song, The Lakes, she wonders, "Is it romantic how all of my elegies eulogize me?" Here, lamentation and celebration then seem to be intertwined as the lyric suggests a particular form of self celebration. When we regard these eulogies as central to the concept of romanticism that is being presented here, we can interpret them as a framework of emotions aimed at conveying heightened emotional states among natural landscapes, something channeled through the lyrical self. But let's see how melancholy takes shape in the song. Um, Here you can pause and please read the lyrics. Okay, thank you. These eulogies resemble the, as Stephen Bending calls, and I quote, pleasurable aesthetic of melancholy that pervades romantic era women's writing. Moreover, as Susan Wolfson's excellent contribution on romanticism and gender and melancholy suggests, melancholy can speak beyond a solitary song. It rather speaks in a chorus of women's social alienation and restlessness. Partaking in the elegiac sentiments of Charlotte Smith's To Melancholy that you have here, so please take a moment to read it. Maybe you can pause again. I'm sorry, but we don't have time, and I thank you very much for doing it. Um, so, as I was saying, partaking in these elegiac sentiments of To Melancholy by Charlotte Smith, Swift adds to this chorus of melancholy musings of women poets, where Smith wanders around the banks of the Aron in the late autumn's evening veil. Taylor dreams of auroras and sad prose in the Lake District. As she walks, Smith hears mournful melodies and reflects on melancholy's magical power that to the soul these dreams are often sweet and soothe the pensive visionary mind, while Taylor bathes in cliffside pools with her calamitous love and insurmountable grief. I don't have much time to go on, but this was briefly covered. So my conclusion is that my research aims to provide the attention pop music deserves as a cultural expression and as a literary product, removing past and even present stigmas and drawing attention to the potential power of popular music as a means of perpetuating and transforming culture. Pop music is, in fact, a suitable and dismissed channel for the dissemination, redefinition, and praising of literature, as we have briefly seen here, not only due to its musical particularities and its social character, but also to its young nature and the rich and very interesting range of themes that it shares with past authors, and thus perpetuating a cultural continuum. Pop music must be seen as an important catalyst for making poetry and literature in general accessible to a wider and new audience. Research shows that music fans generally make the effort to learn the lyrics of the songs, something that makes them research further into the origins and the inspirations of these lyrics, and thus embarking on a navigation through pages and pages of literary classics and non classics. Studying Taylor Swift in particular, as the cultural titan she is today, helps us understand, among many other things, why so many people identify with her music and with her, the composition processes, the emotional implications, and the way in which, ultimately, her voice is part of a larger chorus of women's voices that needs to be listened and addressed today. Thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any doubts, any questions, any comments, suggestions for future research, please let me know. And again, thank you very much.